So, Kelly Cryer, thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me. This is really exciting. It's big. It's a lot to kind of take on, but I'm actually looking forward to it. Definitely, I wanted to provide a bit of a resource, and I'm like, who do I know? Who do I know? First person that came to mind was you, and you so graciously agreed to do this series with me. So maybe you can just introduce yourself and tell a little bit about your practice and how you help women or families in general.
Sure. Okay. So, hi, everybody. I am Kelly Cryer. I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor located in North Carolina. So, a little bit about me. I started in social services through juvenile justice. So, did a lot of work in schools and in the detention centers, and eventually transitioned into community outreach where I worked a lot with families. And as of late, I've transitioned into outpatient therapy. And in this space is where I've had just a lot of women with a wide range of age to come and talk about, just their postpartum journeys or just journeys in parenting and things of that nature. Um, and personally, just a lot of women in my life who have had their own experiences with family planning and things of that nature. And so it's just become a topic that I've found great interest in, and in educating myself a little bit more, connecting with you. And your work has just allowed me to kind of amplify this work a little bit more. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. Again, thank you so much for being here and providing your wisdom to this topic. So, um, as we were preparing, we of course tried to just think about some of the main issues that women might be dealing with. And one of the first ones that came to mind was grief.
Mm-hmm.
And today I just want to talk a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit about the feelings of loss as you're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with kind of the life you saw for yourself and the grief that you have, grieving
Mm-hmm.
that life, that version, that path that is no longer available to you. Something is being closed off, and there's a lot of grief involved around that.
Mm-hmm.
And I can share a little bit about myself. So I am currently experiencing secondary infertility, which means that I had one, I'm going to say perfect just for sake of argument, rose colored glasses and all. One perfect pregnancy 4 years ago. And then since then have had two miscarriages back to back. In fact, excuse me. In fact, in this process, there's so many dates to keep up with. You remember the date you got pregnant. You remember, you found out you're pregnant. You remember then the date of conception, basically. And then, maybe you would then remember, of course, your birthday when you gave birth. So all these dates. But in the low fertility space, myself personally experiencing miscarriage, there's other dates to keep up with. The date that you miscarried, all these dates, the date that should have been your delivery date. And I don't try to hold these dates in my head. I actually try to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized yesterday that it was 1 year from my last miscarriage. And I hadn't been holding that date in my mind. It was one of my nephew's birthday. And I'm like, oh, make sure to call him. I was like, man, did I call him last year? And then it all came flooding back to me. Yes, you called him last year because you were sitting up in your bed, and actually you and your mom, both called him because she
Mm-hmm.
came over to help me. When it became clear, well, she came home early in the day when I was having a little bleeding, but definitely by then it was very clear what was happening. And so just kind of give myself some bed rest. So I say all that to say it is a lot of phases of grief, if that makes sense. And you don't know where you are sometimes. Like I said, I didn't know I was there, but then yesterday I was like, oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so yesterday was hard, and today I was really busy, but today it's kind of just kind of
Mm-hmm.
hitting home a little bit more. I didn't
Yeah.
bring any tissue. Oh, actually, surprisingly, I do, just in case I need it. But again, just using my own story. So that's something that I've been dealing with, just the out of the blue, it
Mhm.
hits you out of the blue.
Yeah.
And so, try not to go down the path of, oh, how old will the baby be? And what will we be doing? And, it's just all these different things. But whatever,
Mhm.
support and wisdom you can provide will be great.
Well, I think to
Really
that
appreciate.
point, particularly, when we think about grief in general, it's not just a start point and a stop point.
Mm,
You can, for all intents and purposes, feel as though you have made it through the hardest of times and, have kind of released those things. And then, just as you said, something out of the blue can trigger that feeling right
yes.
away. And I think in those spaces, we have to sometimes learn to give ourselves permission to attend to those feelings as they come.
Mm,
We have control over our responses sometimes, but we don't always have controls over when we will be impacted or how we will be impacted. And so it's not a linear process. And the best that we can learn to do in the grieving process is to give it space. For some people, it's easier to let go and compartmentalize and tuck it where they want it to be. For other people, the reminders are just everywhere. The children are everywhere, death can be everywhere, loss, for whatever that means, can be everywhere. And if we're always trying to prevent the unknown, it can just be a really, really heavy weight on our shoulders. So
mhm.
I do thank you for sharing that, and bringing that to this space. And so I definitely encourage you to give it space, um, to acknowledge it for what it is, give yourself what you may need in this space, and work to progressively, relinquish yourself from that. Um,
I have a question. So you said that some of us are better at compartmentalizing than others.
mhm.
Um, would you say that that is a good coping mechanism?
Yes and no.
Mhm.
I would say no in the sense of repression, right? Where you just tuck it away, put it where you feel like it needs to be, and you never give it attention.
Mhm.
Yes, in the sense that we all have many things that we are responsible for and that we have to be present to. And so, if I can learn over time to give it space and what we deem to be the appropriate time, right? If I'm at work, I might not deem that to be an appropriate space, but can I, when I'm in a more conducive area, come back to and attend to that thing, attend to that feeling?
Yeah.
So I don't think it's wrong if you compartmentalize or right if you compartmentalize. It's more so finding the balance in that. Am I learning how to effortfully control that at the end of the day and not
Mhm.
ignore it for what it is? So for all intensive purposes, this day is coming up and you kind of tell yourself, I'm not dealing with that it's my nephew's day. I don't need to think about what happened in the past, so I just tuck it away. That wouldn't to potentially be healthy. But if you
Mhm.
said, I'm feeling this, I'm experiencing this, I want to call it for what it is, I want to honor and acknowledge the experience that I've had, and also give my presence to the other things that are also important in my life. You learn in that space how to give it attention, and also give attention to the other things that are also important. So I
Mhm.
don't think compartmentalization is bad, but with anything, moderation. A little bit of too much or not enough of anything can be good or bad.
Yes, and so trying to navigate and find, because we're all are
Healthy
so
ways.
different, yeah,
Hmm.
and what works for you.
Healthy versus unhealthy, and we
Mhm.
all are unique in what is healthy and what is unhealthy, what we have the
Mhm.
capacity for, what we don't have the capacity for. And so, in that space, I do think it's really important that we don't sit in comparison. For someone who may find it a little bit easier to do that, don't compare yourself. Comparison is the
Yeah.
thief of joy. And if we find ourselves trying to compare too much of what I'm able to do versus what the next person is able to do, you don't give it its unique space that it deserves. We
Mhm.
don't always know the internal things that people are struggling with that may make it a little bit easier, or that may make it more difficult to show up and give things kind of space, or to even be able to separate ourselves from certain things.
True, true. I think sometimes I get adding to the grief and the weariness is the knowledge that, you know, this will be with me forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious too. I'm a little sick, y'all. I don't know what's going on. I'm sinus allergy or something, but I'm curious too how it, and I haven't done a lot of thought or, you know, asked a lot of people about how it affects the family dynamic in general. Because of course, you know, I definitely normally say, maybe I haven't really so much to say, but I normally say, you know, we miscarried. You know, I definitely am fully aware that myself and my husband both, and again, two different people, we process it differently, but still, we both were there. And
Mm-hmm.
then even for children, because my daughter
Mm-hmm.
is very aware that something happened that day. She to this day will talk about the monster that bit me in the toilet, because I said something about, you know, not controlling my words. And my mom was
Mm-hmm.
here, so I'm talking to her, you know, about blood and in the bathroom and all that. And so she has, that was a year ago, so she was 3. She
Mm-hmm.
has kept that with her, and she talks about it all the time, just randomly. And so and I just wonder how that, you know, will continue to play out, or what, you know, just thinking about in the future, what kind of stories will I tell her about, you know, that, you know, other siblings, and I'm just curious how they'll play out. But more so also thinking about me, that this will be part of my story, and now I'm just trying to figure out how's it
Mm-hmm.
gonna manifest, how will I'm currently trying to use it for good, you know, how will I be able to take this story and shift from the grief of it so much and kind of use it, because I won't ever really be free of it. I think I was
Yeah.
telling you my analogy the other day of, you know, the sharp stone, and eventually you wear it away enough, it'll become smooth, but it doesn't ever, you know, fully go away, and you still
Mm-hmm.
feel the weight of it, even if it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't
Mm-hmm.
hurt you to talk about or think about.
Yeah. You, to that, what kind of come up came up for me is the way we kind of condition our children, and we can specifically talk about, you know, our daughters and our sons around what parenting is.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, oftentimes this journey of parenting starts early. We have the baby dolls, we see the
Yeah.
bellies growing, you know, this is me taking care of my baby. And so in an age appropriate fashion,
Yeah.
talking about what loss looks like, and even the cycles of what feelings look like when we kind of have those moments of remembrance. And so I think being honest with our children about what's hard to talk about, what we have the space to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
and finding ways to incorporate that in there with them. Um, I do think that, to your point, sometimes we feel like we're going through this alone, and that people don't understand, or that people can kind of be pushy in wanting to know where you are in that process. And
Yeah.
in that process, you have every right to express what you need, as even you're trying to figure out what you need. You know,
Yeah.
mommy needs a moment before she can talk about this. Honey, I need extra space before I can really open up to communicate how I feel, because I don't really even know how I
Yeah.
feel, you know. And when I do have clarity of what that looks like, is it important for you to invite them into that space so that we can kind of keep that bridge of communication open for everyone's understanding as best as we can kind of offer that space.
Yeah.
Um, and so, you know, as it waxes and it wanes, you may find that conversation around it becomes a little bit easier. As you kind of talked about smoothing that stone,
Yeah.
can I over time redefine the purpose of this? What have I learned in the process of this grief or in these experiences that help me to have conversation around the difficulties that you may have experienced? And language matters, you know. When you said the monster that bit mommy in the toilet, how was that language created?
All her.
Okay, so that
Yeah.
was her level of understanding, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, and over time, as she develops, we may take the fear away from it. You know, why was it the monster that bit mommy? Is it something else that we can kind of create language around to give it new meaning, so that it's not something that's potentially negative in her
Yeah,
mind over time, you
definitely,
know?
definitely.
And when it's your first experience and maybe your second experience, there is no perfect way to do it, you know? And so we're all learning in this process, as to how we can show up to explain, to include, to even kind of, you know, nurture ourselves as we're kind of going through that process.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask you to, I wanted to talk about was, so in the realm of grief, because the cost of this is so heavy, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, like I try to say, you know, it goes so far beyond the financial cost, you know, and it is, you know, to things that you can't put a price on. And
Mm-hmm.
so again, the idea of, you know, kind of losing a life that you saw for yourself, and a lot of times that also involves, and sometimes even relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I think about, you know, the strain that it can put on a marriage. The You can even lose relationships with close friends as they are growing their family and experiencing things and shifting the dynamic. We're not going out to brunch doing bottomless mimosas anymore because now I have soccer, or you know. So whether it's in most likely it's not intentional,
Yeah.
but you probably lose access to people, or you choose to, in some ways, to be intentional about it, to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
protect yourself and maybe resist going to places, or you know, kind of bow out and, you know, not want to participate. So um
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what you think about that. Like, how do we, because you can't miss out on life, and that's the other thing, like waiting for this thing to happen, waiting for your time, waiting for your moment.
Mm-hmm.
All this waiting, life is passing you by, and there's a potential to miss your life. Certainly we all are hoping for the happy ending. We're all are hoping that this thing is going to work itself out, and you know, it will come to fruition, our dreams. But in the meantime, how do you suggest we people deal with that, like the living of your life but also protecting yourself, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
both at the same time?
So I think one, giving yourself permission to be angry, sad, disappointed, you know, the plethora of emotions that may come up during that experience. I think as you learn your needs, communicating that, communicating, you know, to your partner or even to your other supports. Hey, I recognize that you guys are having this birthday party, but things are still fresh. And for
Mhm.
me, the best way that I can show up right now is to send a card or to give a call, because it is maybe too fresh or too triggering for you to be in certain spaces.
Mhm.
And the hope is that in your supports that they understand that it does not take away from your love or your concern or your care, but that support may look different, or the support that I'm able to offer from myself may look different in different seasons and different spaces.
Yeah.
um, and to that point of isolation, I think sometimes we have to understand the purpose of it, right? It may have various purposes. Maybe right now things are too fresh and I don't want the, you know, you just need to rest, or it's going to be okay, or you need to lean in on your people, but also recognizing when that is starting to become a detriment. So some things we put into place as protective factors so that people aren't feeling the brunt of what we have going on.
Yeah.
But when we kind of isolate ourselves, we also don't let in the goodness of what our support systems can offer. So as you get to know yourself and get to know your needs, it's important to communicate the boundaries of that and what you are comfortable with accepting, you know, from your support, um, as you kind of go through that process. Building the bridge, as I kind of talked about before, you know, as you kind of educate yourself on what you know to be true about your process, what could be the relevancy of communicating that to your support team so that they understand from a different perspective of the experiences that you may, have going on. Um, I think also in that space, understanding that grieving and what is needed may look different for other people. Some of us are chatty Cathys, right? We want to just talk, 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 talk. And for some of us, talking about it is just too emotionally heavy. So finding a place of compromise, recognizing your limits. Maybe all that I have right now is 5 to 10 minutes to talk about it, but that's giving you space to talk about it. So making sure, as much as we have the capacity to, that we're kind of showing up for each other for whatever that might mean in the space. So the more that we can kind of include people into our process with guidelines, I guess I'll kind of say, right? Here's what I need. Here's what I find to be helpful. Here's what I don't find to be helpful. Um, and as you kind of grow in that, as you continue to heal in that, shifting our expectations. What I expected in the beginning of this process may no longer fit. Here's what I may need in the middle of this process, or as this process comes around all over again. And so, as we can kind of redefine the purpose of certain things, how does this expectation change the trajectory of my life? How does it allow me to be present in the here and now? How has it disconnected me from the here and now, where I no longer have gratitude for the efforts that I have given or the things that I have been able to create and, procure for myself at the end of the day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you were talking, I was thinking about like, I don't know the percentages, but I'm sure it's probably a good 50-50. Some of us are very interested or willing, I should say, maybe not like eager, but willing to talk. And some of us are dealing with these things in private. I know that the dynamic is shifting, that these conversations are happening more. And I also realize that, and I try to use my platform as a voice, because I know a lot of people, some people aren't interested to speak, but are happy to, be in a space where someone is talking about these things. But maybe you're not posting on your Instagram page, oh, I haven't just, like, no one, most of us aren't posting that so publicly. And so Instagram is just one example, but obviously that's what I have decided to do. And I got the blessing from my husband, because again, this is our shared story, but he was comfortable with it. He was comfortable with it. And sorry, distraction. But the other thing I was thinking as you were talking was about the ebb and flow, or good days versus bad days. And I know for me personally, I don't mind talking about it, but I don't like being asked questions about it. I want the control to enter and exit a conversation as I see fit. I don't want to be, like my mom. I don't know if this is for you, but say something's going on with your life and she hugs you and it's just like that.
Whoosh.
Yes. And so for her, she can't talk to me. I can't, no, if I want to talk to you about it, I can, but something about just who she is for me tends to open it up, and it should be a good thing, like that I'm allowed to, have that space with her. But sometimes I don't want to go there, right? So just having that, like you're saying, the boundaries and the guidelines of, I want to be able to talk about it more. Like my husband, I can talk about it with him every day, but we're, we're different and we process differently. So, respecting his guidelines and trying to find mine. But in the moment of all of that, you said something. What was the word you said? Basically about like your team, your group, your people, your tribe. I forget the phrase you used.
Your tribe.
Yeah. So what do you think that looks like for people?
It looks different for everybody,
Yeah.
However, I do think that outside of the space of traumatic events or just grief, it can be helpful to, I like to call them little speed bumps, like reevaluate your circle and reevaluate the purpose of each person in that circle, right? And you may have multiple people who serve the same role, but unique to them, unique to the individual. So if I am recognizing that I'm in a space where I just need to talk, but my circle is comprised of people who just want to give advice and monopolize the conversation, then sis, you most likely may want to ask yourself, is my support actually viable for me?
True.
Is it viable for me in this space, in this season that I am? Because they may have been what you needed in a different space, but as you are experiencing other things, are the people that I have, going to be effective to my needs? And that's no discredit to anyone. But as you kind of gain that awareness of what does feel helpful and what does not feel helpful, kind of recognizing, have I closed myself off to other potential types of support because I'm familiar with this and I'm comfortable with this, and or am I open to exploring, even if culturally, right, the therapist can be part of your team, but culturally, or just in your family dynamic, we don't talk about our problems. We keep it in house. You may be doing a disservice to yourself. That core value and that core belief may not actually be aligned with your current needs. So to answer your question, what could a tribe look like? You may have your OBGYN, your physician. You may have a therapist for people who have spiritual practices. You may have, a spiritual provider or leader. You may have someone who is more well-versed in homeopathic remedies and things versus traditional medicine. You may find an actual circle of women who are experiencing the same thing, because there is a difference from someone who's just offering support from the outside perspective, who has maybe never gone through what you physically are experiencing, and someone who has kind of served in that space. So support groups specific to infertility and secondary infertility may be helpful. So just thinking about, as you do that assessment, what are my current needs and what ways am I open to getting those needs met? Support may look like, right now I don't want to talk to nobody, so I just want to read. I want to have self-help books that allow me to educate myself in a different way. And as my capacity shifts, maybe the way that I build my support looks a little bit different. So it doesn't have to be a fixed thing. If we're closed-minded to the way that support can enter into our lives, then we may be limiting ourselves from the get-go in our journey of recovery and healing.
Of how, yeah. So any advice for within a partnership, how to, because you said briefly, and I personally have done this, about thinking that we're shielding someone from something. And so, like I said, my mom was here during the second one. She actually offered to come the first time, but I said no, thank you. And that probably could have so the second time was like, and that same thing. I was like, no, that's okay. She basically was like, girl, I'm coming, which of course turned out great, if nothing else, just to help me with Reagan. But the point I'm making about that was that later on, when I was processing, I was thinking about how difficult that must have been for her. I cannot imagine, and I don't want to voice it, but if this came to fruition for me later in life, and I was in my mom's shoes. Again, try not to give energy to that at all, but that would be so difficult. And later thinking, and I'm saying because later I was thinking maybe I shouldn't have had her come, because that's such a huge burden for her. But I think one thing you said in another conversation we had was, we often end up denying that person the right of choice, like, because you can always say yes or no to anything, even if you feel like you can't, and you feel like you may be like, well, I have to say yes. No, that's not true. You can always say yes or no. And so just think about that. So wanting to shield her, but then even like wanting to shield my husband somehow. And I avoided telling him that I was even pregnant, thinking that in my logic, somehow this could play out some way. He could be protected if this or that happened. And
Mhm.
of course, you know, once he found out that's what I was doing, he was basically like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Because I would say the same thing, like, how dare you? We're married for a reason, when this partner's for a reason, blah, 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 blah. And so I think my question at the very beginning was, what would you say about processing this with a partner? And I'm sure it's maybe even at some point some people may be doing this alone, but
Mhm.
if you have a partner, what would you say to help kind of navigate this? Because we're not always on the same page, not always on the same wavelength, and we all grieve differently.
Yeah. Yeah. So first, I think it's the giving permission to your partner or to your support to cope differently than you, you know.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes we may be looking for people to validate us in the same way that we validate ourselves, or to grieve in the same way that we grieve. And so if you're not crying the way that I'm crying, this isn't as important to you as it is to me. And that takes work. I think that's the most important thing, that even in opening up ourselves to support, if we're not used to it and if it's not familiar, it's going to feel foreign. It's going to feel
Mhm.
foreign, potentially allowing people to show up as their unique selves and to process in their own way. And so, as I kind of stated earlier, one, I think as you have clarity in regards to how you're feeling and the space that you're in, practicing communicating that I want to invite you in this space. I want to include you in my feelings, but right now I don't feel to have understanding of where I am.
Mhm.
And it can be very uncomfortable to have to say that. And so we have to work to build our what we call like distress tolerance. Like,
Mhm.
identify what that feels like to have to tell your partner, I don't know what I'm feeling, and because I don't know, I can't communicate that with you. Sometimes
Mhm.
we're fearful of backlash. Sometimes we're fearful of our partner being overwhelmed. Sometimes it's, you're just not going to understand where I'm from, or the place for which I'm coming from, which are all, valid emotions. And as you are working towards understanding that, we have to learn to manage the discomfort that comes from communicating those things. And sometimes it comes in having conversations in regards to, hey, this may be very difficult, but here's how you practice it. So it may be every day that I'm feeling something different, I challenge myself to share that. And then I go sit in the feeling of whatever comes up. What was uncomfortable about that? What was hard about that? What was scary about that? Did the response that I anticipate having, did that actually happen? So now we're kind of doing um, facts versus fiction. What is the evidence that proves that my husband is going to go off on me because I'm telling him that I'm feeling disconnected or I'm
Mhm.
feeling misunderstood? What is the evidence that supports that, he actually does give me space to feel what I'm feeling, and I don't have to worry about the stability or the security of our relationship being negatively impacted.
Mhm.
Um, so, kind of giving yourself permission to slowly approach those conversations and to slowly build your comfort in discomforting situations can kind of be helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
slowly.
slowly.
Yeah,
But to
because
that other point, you know, why is it important for me to protect my partner's feelings? Why do I presume that they won't be able to handle what it is that I'm actually feeling? We got to
Mhm.
understand where that kind of origins from. This um, I do think that it's nurturing, right? The same way that we try to shield our children or other people that we care about from hurt, it's a protective factor. But
Yeah.
at what point does that become a self-defeating factor, that I am carrying all of this by myself because strong woman I am feels like this is something that I should be able to do, right?
Yeah.
Where are those shoulds and have tos rooted in, that tell me that this is something that I should have to kind of navigate on my own? And so as you kind of sit with yourself, if that's the place that you eventually arrive to, challenging some of those core beliefs. Where did this origin for me? How did this become a core belief and a value that I have held as it shows up in my life and my interactions? And is it working for me? How's that working out for you? How's that working out? Keeping this information from whomever it is that I am feeling the need to protect at the end of the day. Is it actually working in the way that I presume that it's going to work? And oftentimes the answer is no. Um, but that awareness, that self-awareness is the big piece here. We have to become aware of the purpose that certain coping mechanisms serve in our lives. A lot of times they're just automatic behaviors. These are things that we, outside of grief, have been practicing and conditioning over and over and over and over again. So it's familiar. It's our place of comfort. It may be comfortable to shield your person from that and to not have to navigate and manage the weight of their emotions, when it comes. So I think really understanding what meaning we place to certain behaviors, and certain ways that we show up in things can be helpful to determine if a change and if a shift is needed over time.
Yeah, definitely. I just remember in that moment thinking, just remembering how hurt he was, and trying to figure out a way to spare him at any point, because I'm here already, no one can save me, I'm here. So we both ain't gotta, go through this. That's the illogical logic. And just thinking, that it was definitely coming from, like you said, a place of nurturing. Like, if I can do this for you, I wasn't thinking necessarily like taking on extra. It didn't play out like that, but just like, if I could do this for you, I'm willing to do it. But those things. So before we end, I just wanted to talk to you and see what you can share about. We've been talking about basically like coping mechanisms and tools and resources, and I just wonder, if you have any advice on, as we're navigating this grief that can be a tornado at sometimes, tsunami at other times, it can be numbing at other times, because it I was going to use a negative word. I was going to use the word infects, but I realized how negative that word is. But penetrates so many aspects of our life. It'll be really useful to figure out, or to have a way to prevent it from being so all-consuming. And I definitely was at a place previously where I refused to cry. We're not doing that. But this is which is why I did ask you, like, is it okay to compartmentalize? Because I definitely know I'm a professional. Okay. I've gotten better at it, because, as your phrase, what'd you say? How's it working out? What'd you say?
How's it working out for you?
It wasn't. Excuse me. And so once I realized it wasn't, it's like, oh, so I have to do this. But yeah, it was definitely like, we're not going there. So, and that was in all areas of my life. But so I got to a place where I actually embraced the catharsis, the release, because I don't want this on me. I need it gone. So I have begun to process it that way. So what do you have for us? What resources or words do you have?
So, one, I think in its simplest form, but it's not always so simple for people, is connecting back to the breath. Um, Breathing can help with relaxation management. And so it's kind of like that fight or flight. When we kick into fight or flight, and that cortisol and that adrenaline is kind of kicking in, it can, be overwhelming and over consuming. So on the other side of that is relaxation. So progressive muscle relaxation, where you can sit in what you deem to be a relaxing or comfortable space, tensing up our bodies and connecting the release of that muscle with the breath.
Mm.
Um, Deep breathing to kind of help regulate the cycle of your breath. Meditation. I really like the various platforms that offer, 5-minute meditations
Mhm.
or 10-minute meditations. Some are specific to a topic, some are just um, talking us through different ways to relax ourselves. Imagery is really good. So in imagery, we can think about a place of calmness, or we can think about things that help us to feel relaxed. So you might lay in a comfortable place, sit in a comfortable place, and ask yourself, if I was in a comforting or safe space, where would it be? And
Mm.
actually visualize yourself going to that space, and then connecting our senses. What do I see? What do I smell? What do I taste? What do I hear? Is anybody there with me? What am I doing in that space? And I like that one because you can do it anywhere.
Mhm.
You can be driving and paying attention to the road and still kind of visualizing that place. You can be laying in your bed, you can be in your office space. And that kind of just helps us to shift the focus. Um, I think recognizing when space versus when support is appropriate is a coping mechanism. Sometimes we do just need to be by ourselves, to cry it out, because I don't want to
Mhm.
do it in front of people, but in my solitude, maybe I give myself that permission to release in that capacity, and that can be cathartic. Versus, when are the times where I don't have it for myself. So I need to lean into the support of my tribe to fill me back up to a capacity where I can kind of manage some things on my own. Um, in specific to loss, I love writing. And so writing a letter to that child that you may have lost,
Mhm.
writing a letter to the ideas and expectations that you had, to kind of just release that emotion and to not keep it trapped within.
Yeah.
So journaling, what we call brain dumping, at any point in time, if it hits you in the night, do I have a little notebook by my bed, or we all kind of keep our phones in our bed and just kind of do a quick little blurb about what you're feeling or what's coming up for you? And you can always go back to it at what you deem to be a more appropriate time, as a place to kind of reflect on what was happening and what was going on. And then exercise, right? Working out in some capacity, whether it is vigorous exercise or whether it's more restorative, such as yoga, can allow us to release some of the tension that happens with stress, that we
Yeah.
kind of carry in our bodies. I know we were talking before about um, how women often carry trauma and negative
Mm.
energy in our hips and in kind of our pelvic area. So doing exercises that allow us to release some of that. And I also like how you were talking about the stone, how things kind of smooth like
Mm.
stones. Having things that kind of cue certain things, right? So for me, I wear my grandmother's rings, and that resonates feelings of positivity, that resonates feelings of love, that resonates feelings of life. Although they are not physically here with me, it helps me to shift my focus back to some of those more positive
Mhm.
moments. And so some of these work for people. It's not a one size fit all. So I definitely encourage folks to think about, outside of my grief, or outside of my pain, outside of my discomfort, what were things before that brought me a sense of joy, or what were things before that brought me a sense of relief? Because it's not always going to be a happy feeling. So
Mhm.
just thinking about ways to rechannel some of that negative energy. Hell, if it I need to go outside and scream. That's cathartic too. If I need to punch something, is there something that I can do that is still safe, but
Mm.
allows me to
Release.
release
Yeah.
and relieve that energy that I'm feeling? I had a lady before to say, I walked away, and walking away was good, but I recognized that that rage was still in me, and taking a walk wasn't enough. I needed something that was more intense.
Mm.
Okay. Honestly, we have places like that. I sent a lady to a smash room because that's what she was actually experiencing, and she needed to get that intensity out. And so that was a safe, structured way for her to attend to that specific emotion. And I think that it gives us permission to have the intense emotions just as well as we have the ones that are not as intense or, negative as we might want to put it. So being open to the possibilities and not just thinking that relief has to come in, this pretty little box at the end of the day. Feel what you feel. Feelings are fleeting. So don't allow that feeling to be the definitive moment of who you are in its full totality. It's a moment.
Yeah.
It may be many moments, so attend to yourself as you need to.
Yes, all wise words. And as you were, talking, I definitely am thinking about, from my perspective, working with nutrition with a focus on fertility, of course, but through the path of whole body health and recognizing the way that everything is connected, and even dealing with grief because it triggers basically a different part of your nervous system. It is actually, there's so many things that are drained and so many bodily resources that are needed. I mean, think about how exhausted you are after a good cry. You know how much energy you just consumed. And so, and that's just, how we feel in our body, but within our body and our cells and our tissue and like all those things have a grieving process to it, so to speak, that your body needs so much. So just listening to you, trying to find a way to let it go and release it, because keeping it in can do so much bodily, have so many bodily side effects, certainly because of the way that it drains you, but it also can cause blockages and all these things. So I'm just even thinking about, tools. It's always my easy answer because this is my job. I talk about nutrition, but feeding yourself and taking care of your body and restoring those things, restoring those nutrients, restoring those electrolytes. Like after you have a good workout, right, you're supposed to have a good electrolyte drink. I mean, I'm obviously not recommending Gatorade, but you can make your own, things like that, or even restorative things like essential oils. You're talking about things that you can connect with. There's some that you can take that are safe for internal use, depending on the maker. Everything is made safe, but or even just the aromatherapy of it as it can enter your body. But then just having, very, very good supportive foods and comforting foods. There's literally a real life effect of having chicken noodle soup to make you feel better. Because of the way that it is prepared, it has proteins and veggies and all these restorative minerals and all these things. And then the placebo effect that normally, it's made with love, which my daughter actually starts saying this a lot, like, don't forget the extra ingredients. I always say extra ingredients love, but really to understand that, to have, again, having a tribe or someone who, not all of us is going to shout it from the rooftop, but to have someone to take care of us in these moments of grief, or in the moment of a miscarriage, or in the moment of a failed IVF cycle, whatever that moment is where you just need to be poured into, having someone prepare a meal for you, a warm meal that can be so supportive. So that's always what my go-to is. That I mean, food, come on, who doesn't understand the power of food?
Comfort food, soul food, soul.
Yes. Within reason, right? Don't. Yes. Within reason, understanding the purpose of these things, and and we all kind of sometimes deal with, how we are processing our emotions. And there is, to your point, you said earlier, like moderation, understanding, because some of us eat our emotions, whether it means overeating or not eating, right? You lose your appetite, or you either go ham on something. So just understanding that even when we're dealing with these things, to still take such good care of ourselves, and just
and sometimes care, honestly, one of the most fundamental things that we need is rest.
Oh yeah.
Sleep. And with the adrenaline and cortisol kind of in increasing and surging during stressful times, we know that that can impact our sleep, our appetite, our
Yeah.
mental clarity, our energy. And from that, that can transpire into, you know, intrusive thoughts and feelings of disconnection from self and our community. And so replenishing our need of rest. And I
Mhm.
do understand that for some more than others, rest is easier, right? Actual sleep. And so for those who may find sleeping to be a challenge, or anxiety around not being able to get that type of rest, um, active rest. So that may be, you know, listening to calming music. For some people it's
Mhm.
cleaning. You know, that type of rest and restoration can be cathartic for some in the same ways that actually getting that sleep. I mean, it's not excusable to not get the sleep, but
Yeah.
sometimes our bodies just kind of do their own things. And so um I know for myself personally, when I can't sleep and I get flustered and not being able to sleep, I've gotten up and I will start to write. That's kind of that brain dump. Or I will get
Mhm.
up and I will stretch, or I will get up and do things around the house that may be light, that gets that energy out of me, so
Mhm.
that I then can try to go back and get that rest that I was, you know, kind of fighting within. So part of it is, you know, attuning yourself to your needs. What is my body calling for right now in this moment? And the more that you kind of gain that awareness, the more tools you can add to your toolbox. You know, I think that it's important to recognize that not everything will work in every season for
Mhm.
everyone. And if we kind of hold those ideals that they should, and then we experience that they don't, that can elicit feelings of failure. So recognizing that it's not one size fit all, recognizing that, you know, your needs are just as unique as you are as an individual, and to give yourself permission to try things healthily as much as
Yeah.
you can, to find the remedies that kind of work for you. um, and in doing that, sharing, you know, sharing is caring. Maybe something that I'm trying that someone never even thought of can be helpful for the next person. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
like you're saying, you know, to understand one can't happen without the other. We have to be able to address our grief and sort through it and work through it in order to be at a place where we are, I think you're basically saying like self-aware.
Hmm.
You have to be in tune that it's happening in order to then find the tools to kind of deal with it. So again, you know, using myself as an example, in that time of life where I was in, where I was completely closed off, completely like, so I couldn't even, in the moment, my only reaction was to shut it down. I didn't have other reactions. Okay, what do I need? How can I address this? What will be the most supportive for me emotionally, mentally, you know, right now? And so just to be aware that, you know, if anyone else is doing what I used to do, that I'm working very hard not to anymore, that,
Hmm.
you know, maybe for a season, and, you know, as I'm even saying this, maybe that really is what I need. I don't know. We'll never know, right? But understanding where I am now and how useful it is to, once you can name it, you can address it, you can work through it, you can um,
Hmm.
um, support it, and maybe not always fix it, right? This is not something you can fix, but
Hmm.
it won't be the burden that it once was.
Yeah.
Um, and so we talked about maybe some affirmations or things like that that we can start adding to our routine. You know, not all of us has
Hmm.
the best. None of us, all of us have the best approach to all of this. So maybe we can start adding some positive things to our tools.
Yeah. So I did kind of write out some questions for reflection that whomever tunes into this can kind of use. So we talked a lot about expectations and standards. So one, what standards are you holding on to for yourself, and what are they kind of rooted in? So again, those places of origin that influence the way that we expect ourselves to show up and or respond to certain things. Two, who defines perfection for you? And three, how can I care for myself? And so I think those are three good questions for anybody to ask in any space of grief at the end of the day. And actually, I was listening to something on the Insta of Graham today, And I really, really loved it. It was a mom who was in her postpartum journey, but I think that it can be helpful for infertilities as well. And so it
Mhm.
just goes, hey, just a reminder, no one prepared you for what you were going to go through. There's no way you could have been prepared, and you still handled it with grace, and you still did it the best that you could. And that is enough. You survived 100% of your worst days, and you are still
Mhm.
here. I don't care if you're at the lowest of the low right now. I don't care where you are on the spectrum. You are still here after all of that.
Mm.
That gave me chills. Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
You are still here. And I think that that really amplifies that space of gratitude and the duality and emotion. You know, I can still be hurting and I can be grieving, and I can try my best to find things to be grateful for.
Mhm.
I can validate myself for putting forth the effort that it takes to navigate through these experiences. And I can reinstill hope in working to shift through my expectations, and being open to the possibilities for whatever that may look like and whatever that may be. You are capable of amazing things, and you are still here.
And I really like the first question, the one about uh, the standards,
Hmm.
because a lot of, and we talked about it a little bit, but a lot of the grief is grieving expectations.
Hmm.
Wanting it to look a certain way.
Hmm.
But why does it need to look a certain way? Who told you that it needs to look a certain way? Yes, okay, maybe a lot of this, we are putting on ourselves, but
Hmm.
how did it all shape this way? Why does it need to look a certain way? And
Hmm.
finding, and for me personally, finding comfort in the fact that I literally do not care how this looks. I don't care how old I am. And I was sharing with you, and I probably have shared in the past too. I was so fixated on this age group, this age dynamic, this spacing.
Hmm.
You want the 2.5 kids, and they have to be 2 years apart, and stair steppers, and
Hmm.
says who? That's not even how my
Hmm.
family is. My siblings, we're not even like that. So I don't know when and where and how. I guess at some point it just looked appealing and cute and like, oh, they're whatever. And so,
Yeah.
to your first question, just challenging those
Mhm. The narrative.
expectations,
Hmm.
yes, and
Hmm.
questioning, okay, but does it need to look like that? And because a lot of times, women want to their families to look a certain way, and they need to be open to adoption, or um, a surrogacy, or egg donors, whatever it is. And it looks differently for a lot of people, but
Hmm.
um, that may be a bridge that some people find themselves at, and there may be a little resistance because, no, I want it this way. It's supposed to happen this way. And
Hmm.
so I really like that first one, just challenging the expectations, and says who.
And I think to that point, a lot of our views are shaped culturally, they're shaped by our society. And so I think when you get to a place where you can have more autonomy as to what you are influenced by, because when you're younger, we don't have choices. I mean, it may not feel as though we have the choice, right? You're exposed to what you're exposed to, and that often will um, create our core beliefs, at the end of
Mhm.
the day. And so, if I'm never exposed to a variety of things for me to be able to make an informed decision as to what I feel is
Yeah.
best, then I'm going to potentially go with the status quo. And so,
Yes.
again, as you kind of gain that awareness of, I'm feeling real pressured to meet this standard, and
Yeah.
I'm feeling real defeated in not being able
Not
to meet
needing
this
it. Yeah.
standard. Does this standard work for me?
Yeah.
And even in kind of recognizing what you're ingesting. Social media is
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So we see these people putting things out on social media, and it's perfection again, right? They don't really show the challenges and things of that nature that may have happened to create these dynamics. And so if we are only ingesting things that are perfect to the standard, then it doesn't make room for the expectation, from different expectations. And so sometimes we have to purge ourselves from that for a little bit to gain more clarity as to what do I value? Why do I value that? Does something about my value need to change to bring the expectation and the reality a little bit closer so that we're not having this gap and disappointment and anger and resentment, kind of festering in that gap because my expectation and the realities of what I'm experiencing are not kind of matching up.
And the only thing that can move is expectation, because reality gonna sit where it's gonna sit. It's gonna be what it's gonna do. It's gonna be what it is. So only we can control is ourself, is our perspective, is our outlook, and obviously not overnight, but just slowly working to shift that and to maybe even come to terms. Maybe that's also what I'm thinking. Just moving it and when you take something into yourself, like I can't think of the word, but assimilating it, maybe that's what I'm thinking of, and just using that and shifting. And I mean, because we're already not where we thought we're going to be. We're already sometimes not quite what we thought it was going to be anyway. So we might as well proactively like lean into that and say, okay, but who can I be? What can I be? What does my life look like? What does this all mean? And I'm thinking of another topic we're going to get into later, about like still finding the joy in these spaces and in these moments of growth and shift and change and all that. So thank you so much for all of those. Yeah. Thank you for being here. I'm trying to get myself together. Thank you so much for being here. It's just good to talk about these things, and I really hope that someone else will find it helpful because it can be so isolating and so, like, you just feel so alone, and not all of us have resources. Some have more than others. So for anyone who doesn't feel like they have the resources or the support or the community, or who is I say it like this all the time, I hate saying it this way, but suffering in silence. For anyone who's doing that, I definitely wanted to be able to bring you here, talk to, anybody who listens to me, and now they can have access to you. So, so this is a good first part one. I would say
This was fun. I definitely enjoy it, and it's educating me, and the more that we know and the more that we share, just it makes our support network stronger, and reach one, teach one. So I do think that the more that we kind of normalize these experiences in the here and now, a lot of us have younger nieces and nephews and daughters and sons who we can start to teach differently. And that's not to say that the way for which we were reared and taught certain things was wrong, but it just expands our knowledge base. It expands our knowledge base to, again, give autonomy to the way that we choose to go about these experiences that we are having. And it doesn't kind of keep us boxed into those standards, or those very limited standards of how things should be. So we shifting the tone. So it's not for, I think it kind of amplifies that thought that sometimes what you go through is not solely for you. It's to be able to foster these type of discussions, to hopefully help the next person who may be at the very beginning of their journey, or to validate the person who may be at the end of their journey. Like, you know what? I'm not alone in this. I knew that something wasn't quite right for me personally. So we're giving a voice. We're giving a voice to the folks out there. So,
and that is definitely my mission. I was in a space of feeling uncomfortable, that I was going through these things that I'm trying to help women go, help them navigate and support them through. And so, but I have actually embraced it. And I think you actually said the exact thing earlier, like sometimes it's better to find support from someone who understands firsthand and not just some theory or something they read in the book, or, and so that's where I am. I'm hoping to use my story, and this is why I thought of this. This is the things that I've been dealing with and trying to find a way through, and then talking to clients, and it's like, okay, we need a little more. We need more spaces like this, and need to be open and safe spaces, and people should feel welcome to come in. So again, thank you for guiding us through this discussion today. And so this is part 1, and we have 3 more parts. So we will be back to finish our series. Do you want to talk about it? Series. So thank you, Kelly.
You are welcome, and thank you for having me and thinking of me. And I look forward to doing more.
Okay, and you all can find me on Instagram at Mooncatching. What about you, Kelly?
You can find me on Instagram as well at the Jazzy Little Therapist.
That's right, and I'll put all that info somewhere for us. All right, girl. Until next time.
Peace out.
Bye.
Bye.